Lab testing is mandatory essentially for all products sold in the EU and the US. And if I use the Bluetooth speaker as a starting point, I will explain how you can identify testing requirements and also request a lab testing quotation. So in this case, I've already created a requirements list, but as I have mentioned, that's always the starting point. Always start with creating a requirements list. Again, I've already done so, and I'm now working my way through these different entries, right? And if I scroll down, the vast majority of these entries, they have something like this icon, this yellow icon, and then lab testing. And then it often says something like lab testing is required to verify compliance with the applicable requirements. And that means there's some sort of provision that mandates lab testing in order to comply with the EMC directive. Okay? And you will find something similar down here under ROHS and under the LVD, the radio equipment directive, the batteries regulation, and so on. So what I'm getting to is that there's often more than one testing requirement that can apply to a given product. And in this case, I may have 5 or 6 different types of tests that apply. And as you can see here under the batteries regulation, if you scroll down, you see that, well, you find the exact same thing. And in other entries as well. So how do I take action? Well, I need to start by requesting a testing quotation. That's the first step. And again, it's a Bluetooth speaker. I then go here. I can upload an existing test report, and if I don't have one, I request a test quotation, and then I go here. You can also find this in the sidebar menu. Anyway, what am I selling? Bluetooth speaker. Materials in this case, a PC plastic. I will also provide some additional information, but let's do that later on. Category electronics, age group, let's say it's above 12 years of age. I intend to sell it in the EU, manufacturing country, let's say Vietnam. Okay, you write your email and your phone number. Down here, you can type in additional requirements, questions, or relevant information. This could be if you have specific testing requirements, maybe you're aware of something already. Maybe you're not aware of testing requirements, you want them to make an assessment, you want them to assess the standards that may apply, or the substances to test for. You can also write that here. If you have specific requirements that the lab should be located, ideally in a certain region or a country, then you can also write that here. And if there's any other relevant information about the product, that could be about components, materials, input voltage, functionality, then also provide that information here. The testing companies, they are more than, let's say, entities that receive samples and outcomes test report. When you send a quotation request to a testing company, to a qualified testing company, based on the information you provide, they can, let's say, bridge the gap between the somewhat open-ended requirements as they are written in regulations and directives, and how compliance is to be verified in practice. What I mean is that, let's say, under the low voltage directive, it sets certain criteria and requirements that products must meet in terms of electrical safety, but it doesn't exactly tell you how this is to be done or how you verify these. So testing companies can, in this case, assess which specific standards would apply to my Bluetooth speaker. For example, they could also help me determine what kind of chemical testing, what kind of substance testing would be needed based on the material specification, in this case PC plastic. Maybe they will consider it necessary to test the product according to, say, a certain phthalate or something like that, on the basis that I shared information about the casing material. So That's why labs, they are really important. They bridge the gap between the sometimes quite vague, cryptic, open-ended requirements as they are written in directives and in regulations, and help me assess which chemical to test for, which standards to test according to. So they're very important too, almost like connecting tissue, the last mile, so to speak. Anyway, when you request the quotation, normally take 2 to 3 days before you receive a response. They may have questions for you, or they will send you a quote right away. If you accept the quote, you will receive an address as a testing facility address, and you submit the number of requested samples. That's what they need in order to start a testing process, which can take anything from 1 to 3 weeks in most cases. Now, if you don't agree with the quotation, you can discuss it with them, and you can maybe work your way to some sort of solution where you optimize the testing procedure or something like that. Of course, you should never skip on testing. That is in practice mandatory, but that's a different story. There can be ways to reduce the cost by optimizing the testing procedure. There are certain ways. And if it turns out that the testing company cannot test your product for whatever reason, then reach out to us. We have a network of testing companies that we work with in Europe, in Asia, and also in North America.